I need to get us on Facebook.
Yes, please.
But the technology is still slightly beyond me, but we get there eventually.
Not at all. You're an absolute genius.
Oh, I'm just a world-class bodger. I will have a go at anything. That's really the only thing I do.
Super.
So it is setting us up, and whilst it does that, I'm going to go on my phone to see that we turn up. We're here already.
Oh, perfect. I want to apologise in advance. My dogs, because it's bin day, are going mad. So if you hear them, I'm really, really sorry.
Do you know what has been, for me, what's been absolutely wonderful about this mad period of history that we're living in is that working people are understanding what parent carers live with all the time. You know, we go into these meetings with professionals, etc., and we've always got kids in the background or around our feet and managing it. And now all of the people we work with are going, "Oh, I'm really sorry, we've got a child." And say, "Yes, that is normal." Yes. You know, there's every chance. There shouldn't actually, but regularly I will have one of mine come in crisis, and I'm really sorry, but if that happens, I will stop and deal with the crisis, because otherwise I've got a week's worth of fallout to deal with.
Just makes everyone human, that's all. It makes everybody human.
It does. I'd like to say hello to everybody, to our lovely members of Family Voice. And if you're not a member of Family Voice, but you've appeared here, join us, because we're a lovely bunch. And we have ways of bringing you information. And I think, you know, there's an opportunity like this where we're able to link parent carers with practitioners, with people who manage the services. And it, as you say, it makes us all human. It makes us realize that all of us in the system, whether we're parents, whether we are SYmcox, whether we're SEN managers, actually we're there because we really care passionately about these little children who are finding life a little bit more challenging than most. So many of you will have seen the presentations that Kat, Pippa and Jane did for us yesterday. I think it might be useful if we can start by just a quick introduction, and then I've got some questions from our lovely parents that I will put to you, if that's okay, just so everybody knows. We haven't had a chance to give the questions to Kat, Pippa and Jane, so I'm kind of, it's really live, but I promise to be kind. And what we will do is if we don't have the answers straight away, we'll go and find them and get them back. I think that seems the reasonable thing. So, Kat, you are at the top of my screen. Would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Kat Link. I'm a SEND advisor in the northwest of the county. So I support nurseries, childminders, creches, places that take the tiny people and support them through looking after their children with additional needs.
Lucky, lovely, thank you. Pippa.
Hi everybody, I'm Pippa Gray. I'm the early years manager, and I have a slightly different role to Kat and Jane. So I support the early years sector, so childminders, like Kat just said, nurseries, preschools, but we support around the quality of provision. So we do a lot of inclusive practice, but at that very universal level. So making sure the first bit that your children will see is in place. And is really good provision, so they get everything they need, hopefully at that level, before they move on to maybe Kat and James.
Brilliant. And Jane.
Hello everyone, I'm Jane Gupta. I'm the early years SEND manager, so I manage the team of advisors, which Kat is one of. You know, fantastic position because I've got some fantastic advisors in the team. So yeah, that's what I do, sit alongside Pippa. I go like that because she's sitting below me. I don't know if you are. I work very closely with Pippa because obviously the quality and inclusion sit close together. You can't do one without the other. So yeah, we're very, very happily recoupled in this current little restructure that we've had. So yeah, we're back together.
Wonderful. And can I just ask, one of the little questions I had following your presentation is, I was really fortunate when my little one was young that we were supported by Portage. And am I right in thinking that Portage kind of sits within somewhere in this world, or does it sit slightly separately?
Jane.
Who wants to answer that? So Portage, it does sit in our world very much so, but Portage works with families in their home, whereas the main focus of us three is we're supporting the practitioners to be able to support your lovely children, whereas porters, you'll be working directly with families in their own home. So it's almost the bit that we do.
Lovely. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because we also, some of our families arrive in the world in a really, really highly specialist world where a lot comes into the house and a lot is one-to-one. But of course, most of our children, when they're little, first of all, we don't know if they've got an additional need or not. And their first input into this world of school and society is preschool or childminder or nursery. And so that early identification, it's really important that they know what to look for, isn't it? So shall I get on with my questions? Because we could have a conversation, but actually I'm here to be the voice of other parents. Pippa, yours was the first one that we saw. We wanted to know, how have you found that COVID has affected particularly the social learning of these little ones? And I suppose following on from that, how can parents help compensate for any difference in their development?
Okay, so we've done a bit of research. There's some national research on the impact of COVID on young children and their development, but we did a spot of research within Surrey, very small scale, and we kind of did find that the biggest impact was on children's communication and language and their personal, social and emotional development, partly because lots weren't attending provision, because they were either closed or they weren't a key worker's child. You know, there was lots of issues, so they weren't attending. But also, I think it's because families weren't able to get out. So they weren't seeing other families. You know, it was very isolating, wasn't it? So I think the biggest bit of advice that we can give you, where you can, get out, be with other children. You know, those toddler groups are so important for children to be with children. So it's great if they are attending a nursery and they're getting those experiences with their peers. But if they're not, and they're at home with mum and dad, access to all of those toddler groups is just so essential. Anywhere you can go, outdoor spaces, you know, anywhere you can go where children can be with other children, so they get those models. So that's kind of the biggest bit of advice I can say to parents is get back out there. I know it's quite scary, and that's why I kind of encourage the play dates in the park and things like that, because I think people are still a little bit fearful. But really it's about just getting back out there and trying to get in amongst other families and other children as much as possible.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I know we talk and we've got the children obviously who had to stop attending, but we've had quite a lot of babies born since then, haven't we? And we hear of a lot of families where separation anxiety is massive. And if somebody comes into the house, the little, 1-2-year-old is just terrified. I wonder, have you had to give any additional support to the settings and practitioners around that separation anxiety issue?
Yeah, so we've had a bit of a mixed bag around separation anxiety. So we've had some settings that have said, because parents are just dropping off at the door and they're not going in, it's been a lot smoother. But actually what we suspect is that's not smoother on the parents or the littlies potentially, because that's a really hard thing to do. So we are trying to encourage as much as possible. We are very aware that COVID's still there. So we are trying to encourage as much as possible that parents do have the opportunity to actually come into settings where they can, and they are given that opportunity to spend some time in the nursery with a parent, because actually separation is more about the parents leaving than the little ones, depending on their age. You can leave quite a small baby and they don't necessarily notice, and then you hit that kind of 6 to 9 month mark and all of a sudden everything just goes crazy, doesn't it? So that's kind of the advice we've had to give, is to be fair to parents, really slow introduction, slow transitions into the nurseries, trying to share as much information virtually as you possibly can before they even come to the nursery, so that parents really get a good idea of what is happening for their children when they're inside. Because I know as a parent myself, it's the worst thing when your child starts saying hello to people in the street and you don't know who they are. You feel like it's the first time you've lost them, isn't it? You're kind of like, oh, they recognise somebody and I don't know who that is. So it's really important for parents that they do get the opportunities to see the inside of these nurseries and preschools and childminders as well.
We had a wonderful story come to us a couple of weeks ago from a parent of a little one who's, I think, 2 years old, and having had a difficult experience at another nursery. There are some additional needs. I'm not sure whether the little boy has a diagnosis, but clearly there's some social communication difficulties. And the nursery that he's in now, one of the things that they recognized was that he did need extra time. But the other thing is, because often that handover is really quite traumatic, what the nursery will do if it's been a difficult morning is they'll send a photograph of the child to mum. And I think that, we hear, many of us in this world are often told, oh, they're fine in school or they're fine in nursery. And when we have a child who comes back in a traumatized state, it's very difficult to understand that, to have that visual of what's happening. I thought that was just such a lovely example, particularly when you've got a little one who's got those additional needs, and it just feels more intense, doesn't it?
It does, and I think for so many children, particularly 2-year-olds aren't very good at self-regulation, and so they shouldn't be. You're two. You can't hold all of that stuff in. But actually, it's worth recognising that for a lot of children, particularly further up the age range of early years, they do contain a lot of things when they're in nursery. So when they come home, it kind of almost explodes for some children. So it's really good that parents do get to see that children are settled in nursery, and that they're not, how they're kind of responding at home may not be how they're responding at nursery, because they're kind of contained, and it's
That's
very
right.
difficult. I always say about my own children is they're a nightmare at home, but they're great when they're out. And it's kind of that same thing. They don't have to contain it at home, do they? So I guess that's a really good point, is that anything they can do, now we've got this kind of virtual world, can they take the laptop in and show, the child's not going to know the parents on the other side of it, mobile phones, this kind of forum is great, isn't it, for that?
I've got a list of questions that have come in the last 24 hours, but I've just had a parent give a little comment, and I wonder who is best placed to advise. I don't know. I'm going to ask all three of you. Do you have any advice to parents where other parents shun their child or block social interaction, block any interaction due to the child's difficulties with social interaction? I'm thinking, the child who is really struggling to behave, and so all of the other mums won't speak to you, and they don't invite you to parties, and you get completely ostracized sometimes. Any advice?
I guess I'll start with the universal kind of level is, it's really, if your child is in a setting, it's really talking to the setting about the experiences they're having, because they might be able to help support around that. We talk a lot about settings being clear with parents that actually some children find things more challenging than others. So giving them the opportunity. We get a lot of, my child got bitten, my child got hit, those kind of things, which are really difficult. And actually it's about an inclusive environment for all of your parents. I'm sure Jane will agree, as much as it is for your children, making sure that parents know what good inclusive practice looks like. And that at times children are going to be more distressed than others. So I would say if they are in a nursery, that's a brilliant thing to do, is to speak to the nursery and see if they can kind of forge some of those relationships, maybe break down some of those barriers a little bit. I'm sure Jane and Kat will have more to add.
I was going to say similar, is speaking to the nursery to help support that barrier that's in place from those other parents.
Do you find that settings will, I just wonder, I don't remember very many kind of general parent interactions. I spoke to my nursery one-to-one, but I was also the mum who had the difficult child. And I remember, particularly when I remember doing this when they went to reception, I wanted the teacher to speak to all of the other parents and say, this is who he is, this is how he is, this is why, and mum is not a bad parent, and that family is part of our community, and you need to be part. Is that something that settings will do, or how do they manage the normal parents? I'm really sorry for using that word.
So it's definitely something that a setting can do. It depends how confident the setting staff are. They can always come to us, if there's a real problem, and we can support with giving. We won't actually go and do it for them, but we can give them some kind of top tips of how they can manage those conversations with all their parents. I mean, it's great if a parent is very willing for the other parents to know their child a little bit more. Quite often we have that, we don't want the other parents to know, and then it's much more challenging, because how do you explain about a child's needs when you're not actually saying what the child's needs are, who the child is? So that can be a bit challenging. So it's definitely something. And if any parents out there have got children at settings and they're experiencing that, and the setting are unsure, please tell them to get in contact with either my team or Jane's team, and we will support them in having those conversations.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on because we have limited time and I have far too many questions. Where shall I go? Where shall I go? I'm going to ask Kat, you talked about the developmental tracker, I think. And I can't remember whether it was answered later, but one of the questions that has come up is, as a parent, can I see that tracker? And is it something that I can be part of?
Yes, absolutely. So you can see on the local offer, you can see a blank one, just so that you can see like what the sections are and how the nursery are gathering that information. But absolutely, nurseries should, and childminders, you know, the settings should be sharing that information with parents and feedback from parents, because in a setting we see a child for 15 hours. Yeah. That's not the full picture of their development, is it? So absolutely, parents can be involved in that process, and it's about the nursery, as good practice, should be sharing that anyway. But if they're not, definitely ask to see it. And then when you're looking at the age bandings, because it's sort of age and stage is how it's laid out. If you're unsure why your child is in a certain age bracket, absolutely ask the nursery for a bit more information. Is that, oh, why have you put them down there? Or, you know, and they should be able to answer that, because Ofsted are going to ask them the same question.
No. And then you talked about that support that a setting can start putting in place using things like the speech and language pack or the occupational therapy pack. I have two questions there. Yes. Number one is, as a parent, can I see those packs? Because it would be really helpful to know what you're actually doing, maybe even to learn what I can do with my child to support. So is that something, again, that I could ask the nursery? You can ask
the nursery for, and they are on the local offer page as well, so they are freely accessible. I would also be advising a nursery to be sharing the pages they're using with parents, so that that support can be going in at home as well, because we know if it's consistent, it has more of an impact. So absolutely.
And then I suppose that the follow-up question is, when we have a child that is struggling and we've been told, we've identified that they've got some OT needs or some speech and language therapy needs, it's really difficult to, you know, as a parent, you kind of go, oh, okay, so who's the speech and language therapist I need to speak to? Or who's the OT I need to speak to? How can we trust that the people in those early years settings have enough training and understanding to use those packs or be able to identify the needs?
So we support them with the packs, and the packs come in two parts. So the first part is you sort of go through with the child's needs, and it directs you to advice pages in the second part, which is where the strategies and targets then come from. So the packs exist as two entities, I guess. So one directs them to the right page in the second pack that they need to use, whilst they're waiting for that input from the outside agencies. But we support that.
It's something we hear a lot about from parents, particularly as they go through and if their child's needs increase, is I suppose as parents, we get maybe sometimes too reliant, but sometimes absolutely reasonably or appropriately reliant on a professional's opinion. And it can be really difficult. So I remember the times where you think, well, you've told me that my child is reading at, you know, this level. I'm going, yeah, but when I'm at home, he's reading at this level. So what's going on, and how do you find, and finding the right professional can feel like you're looking for the, you know, actually I need the professional who can be impartial and have that expertise to say, yes, this is the thing. So I think that building that trust in that universal provision feels really important. And in the earliest setting, especially, we find so often, you know, you'll go to nursery, and the next thing you know, one of your fellow mums is one of the teachers there. And so you kind of think, well, how much training have you had? And my kid's a little bit weird and special and difficult to cope with. So how can I trust that you know what you're doing?
Yeah, and that's why I think this forum is really useful, because you guys now know that we exist. And if you are struggling sort of with your nursery, wanting to know what training they've had, and because a lot of the time they haven't had a lot, in these sort of areas. We put on training, speech and language put on training, but can you release all your staff to go to all of those trainings? It's, you know, it's tricky. And we can support nurseries with directing them to the right space, towards the right trainings, and we can come in and do observations and say, oh, actually, did you spot this? I would go and use this resource pack, and we can give a bit of direction as well.
And I think one of the things that feels quite important, I suppose, to share is, Kat, you know, you and I have known each other for a little while for work, and you've spent a long time working with disability challenges. Yeah. So you are steeped in inclusion practice. And I think it's really important that within Surrey County Council, we've got these people who've got phenomenal experience of additional needs and inclusion, because again, from the outside, you're all kind of sat behind this big building. And what I love about doing this is that we're saying, look, you're humans, you're real.
Yeah. We're real people, and we've come from the floor. We all have experience of being in nurseries, childminders. You know, we've all got that on floor experience before we come and sit behind the big building.
I'm very aware that my time is zooming, and I think I could easily spend 2 hours with you. Jane, I really loved your visual description of how you do things in your presentation. It was brilliant. I would say, you said at one point, which I really loved, in your partnership working slide, you mentioned, you know, that a lot of parents will know the list of various services. I think the one thing that I would share with you is I don't think that's the case. I looked at that and thought, this is such a phenomenal resource. It's there. I don't know what half of this stuff is. Well, I do now because I've been, you know, living this, but a lot of us won't. So I want to really thank you for sharing the amount of information you did with us. I think it's going to take a lot of our parents time to process all of it, but it was really, really valuable. There are so many questions, but what I really, really wanted to ask you is, where was it? You know, the Surrey support plan.
Yes.
The Surrey support plan was quite exciting to me.
Yes.
And what I wondered is, as you had been talking, I was thinking within the graduated response caterpillar, those of you who haven't watched Jane's previous presentation, you're going to have to go and watch it, because otherwise what I say will make no sense.
Won't make sense.
I wondered, within that graduated response caterpillar, where is the point at which a child will be put on the send register of a setting?
That's a good question. It's all about early identification, as you said earlier on, and that early identification can take place in Pippa's realm, if you like, in the quality and in the universal. So I don't think there's a definitive answer to your question, actually. I think that I think all children should be on some sort of everyone's radar, by the way. Yeah. So I just think as soon as you become aware that something else is going on for that child that needs a little bit more, as soon as that the practitioners are aware of that, I don't know if I'd call it a send register. I just think it's in the
radar.
Yeah, absolutely.
We find that children often into primary school are having quite significant difficulties, and there's lots of a lot of informal interventions, but they haven't been identified by the school as having additional needs, and that can cause real problems later on. So that was why I wanted to ask that. And then I was about to say, you know, when you're at that setting support bit, do you at that point get what I would have thought of as an individual support plan? And then you mentioned Surrey support plan. So I thought, is that what that is?
Yes, exactly. So the individual support plan, practitioners can choose whatever they want to use to support children, but we would encourage practitioners to use a Surrey support plan, because everything is that one document. You don't have to fill out the whole thing. And now that you're aware of it and families are aware of it, there's nothing that goes on in practitioners' world that you shouldn't be aware of, by the way. So when you say, can we have this? Can we see? Of course you can. It's about your child. So absolutely. That's the reason, that the main reason why I shared so much information is so that you're aware of it. So you can go and knock on the door of your early years practitioner and say, well, can I see it then? Where is it and what's going on?
And I love that. Yeah, yes. I love that, because you're right. And so much of the support and the help that's put in place for child with additional needs in school is done in school. And there is a distance between the parents, and parents are often, you know, parents tell us all the time that they feel like they are blamed for things.
Absolutely. absolutely. The whole premise of early years is that you are the main partner, and everything that happens in an early years setting should be in partnership with you. And parents and carers. So everything that's, from planning, from interventions, everything, you should be involved in every element of your child's life in an early years setting. It doesn't make sense, like Kat says, what will be the point of a child going to a setting for 15 hours? But the majority of the time is, guess what? It's spent with you.
Exactly.
With you. So, we need those, you need those support strategies and all those interventions to be holistic. We can't just do it, between the hours of 9 and 3. Life isn't like that, is it? So we need to work together.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, which seems obvious to me, but I'm not at all sure is happening consistently, let's say, is it looks like you've got this beautiful document where you've built up a picture of a child and what they need to support them. How often or should, I don't know how to ask my question. At times I'm articulate, and then other times I'm a gibbering wreck. I'm thinking of the transition into school, and it seems to me that support plan should carry on. And
absolutely. So that's the idea. You can, once you've got that Surrey support plan, in my ideal world, in utopia, you'd have a Surrey support plan that goes throughout the whole of the school. That'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? Then you have to, it would all be there, and you'd see the child's journey.
And then
so
presumably,
absolutely.
It presumably that could, if it needs to, you've got all of the evidence and all of the things to move into an EHCP if you need it.
Yeah, but you can also have the transition plan as well. So we have a transition, a passport plan, so that Kat's team can support settings with collating all the relevant information, because what schools do tell us is that they can't possibly have or digest the amount of information that because early year settings are fantastic and they collect so much information, but for a school to sort of digest and look at all of that information, if you're being generous, that could be overwhelming. So on a transport and on our early years passport, we condense all of the information which the team support the setting with, and we can support the child with transitioning into school with their passport and identifying all the strategies that are needed to go into school.
Great. So actually, again, if you've got a little one at that stage and you haven't heard of a passport, it might be a good idea to go and say to nursery.
Yes, absolutely.
High time. Let's get on with it.
Yeah. Can we have a transition meeting? Can we have a transition plan?
Brilliant. The one thing that I wanted to talk about, because I think I've got enough time for one more question. You talked about the caterpillar being something where you can move in all directions. And absolutely. I know what you're saying, and I've been in so many of these discussions around inclusion, and I'm really lucky that my children are grown up, so I'm not living in the thick of it at the minute. But I do remember how utterly terrifying it is whenever somebody in the system tells you that they're going to reduce support. Mm-hmm. And particularly, that notion of, hang on a minute, my child's doing okay. They're doing okay because you've put this support in place. Yeah. No, you're telling me it's going to go now. I wondered, how do you support families, or how does the system support families to say, actually, we think that your child will be okay because we've put that support in place, they've reached a certain developmental stage, and we can now reduce a little bit. How do you support a family in that?
Well, we have a team around the family meetings. We have, they're called, it's a bit of a mouthful, but the early years inclusion pathway planning meetings, where families are very much key partners in that. And that's where we would talk about the plans and the interventions. And, if things are working well, we want them to continue to work well, but we're not going to pull out all of the support. That just means that maybe the setting have got it now, they've got the right strategies in place. So therefore but there's no way we're going to reduce support in an early years setting to the detriment of a child. But there are times when a child does make progress with a bit of a platform to improve their skills, and therefore it's not needed long term. I mean, Pippa probably can talk about that more in like the group work, the Universal Plus, where it's a bit of an injection. And then children can improve. And it doesn't necessarily mean they've got to go down that caterpillar all the way down to an EHC needs assessment. We're working towards children not having to rely on an EHC needs assessment. Ideally,
we know, don't we?
Children's needs to be supported, as much as possible.
And we know, don't we, that with some children, they may need a special needs nursery, but that will allow them to then integrate a mainstream school because they've had that booster support. It's really interesting. I mean, for me, apart from anything else, I keep coming back to actually one of the most important things feels like that support plan being a dynamic document, because it will show, won't it, that if the support helps, is removed,
absolutely.
it might improve, but it might need to be put back in, and you don't need to go through one of the things.
And you're right with this, and it shows you all of the assess, plan, do, review cycles. It'll show that you're following a graduated response, and as long as you can evidence that, then the child should be sitting in the right part of the caterpillar, and you shouldn't have to be.
As well, Jane, it's child development isn't like that.
Yes, exactly.
Child development is like that, and the reformed EYFS really reflects that. So it's very much about children's needs being quite transient and moving around. So for all children, there will be times where they need extra support and times where they don't. So it's just getting the balance of that. So even if they haven't got a Surrey support plan, at one part of their life, they may need that the practitioners to put in extra bits, but they won't always need that. So it's just reflecting that across general practice as well, isn't it, Jane?
Yeah.
And I just to finish off, because I know that parents have asked us about this, for those parents whose children have quite complex needs, and I haven't talked about, we've been talking in the world of inclusion really more than anything, haven't we, today? So I'm not ignoring those children who have really complicated needs, who are identified very early. That's happened in other conversations because they are equally important. But for those of us whose children sit in that difficult bit, where we know that they are likely to have long-term issues, the assess, plan, do, review phrase is very, very triggering, because many parents, and particularly, we live in a world of social media, so parents learn from parents who've come before. And the parents who've come before have often experienced that, well, we're not going to do anything until we've done 2 cycles of assess, plan, do, review. And as parents, we're going, hang on a minute, this is not going to change. He is like this. He needs the proper serious support now. Don't make me wait 6 months.
Yeah, but the thing about the caterpillar is you don't start at the beginning, because like Pippa says, it goes, but it's not a pathway. If you've got a child with more complex needs, as you're saying, they might come in at specialists. They might come in at the latter part of the caterpillar. You don't have to go through every part of the caterpillar to arrive at the point where you get the support that you need. You can start at the point that is relevant for you. It's the right support at the right time.
That's a wonderful answer, Jane. Thank you. And I think that will, to know, particularly if your setting is not so experienced and sees it as that, as a parent, to understand that and to be able to say, actually, I've just heard this, and can we look further? I think hopefully that's going to give some settings the confidence to come and talk to you and say, can we do this? If they may have understood it differently. So thank you. Do as I say, I'd love to carry on, but we're out of time. I'm very frustrated. Can I gently bully you into taking questions if they keep coming? And I know we are going to carry on working, because we do quite a bit of work on the early years at Family Voice. But are you happy for me to come to you with any further questions that we get?
Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so very, very much. It's been so exciting to have this group discussion. We haven't done that before, and I don't know about you, but I just found it really, I'm buzzing. I'm a happy girl. Thank you so much. I'm going to press stop on everything, she says. Bye, everybody.